Welcome to the Glorious Professionals podcast brought to you by GoRuck Media. I'm Jason McCarthy here with Emily. Let's dig in.
My dear sister Jaala, it isn't that the Taliban are getting close to Kabul. The truth is, we are surrounded. Ghani, the president, has fled the country and abandoned us. We are trapped and cannot flee. There is no hope. This is the beginning of a voice message I received earlier today from my closest Afghan friend who lives in downtown Kabul. It is the reality on the ground. She has been working with the British for many years, educating women and doing nation-building work. This work now leaves a target on her back, so she is hiding with her family in a friend's basement. She has a visa, but can't leave. The airport is overrun with foreign evacuees, so the Afghans who should be evacuated have no choice but to hide. Right now, the best I can do to help is to remind people that this is happening now, today, this minute. God help my friends. I remember Kabul a decade ago, when I first met Rabia. It was recovering, opening up, colorful, and alive. We could walk through the mall and the market together on sunny days and be happy. This is the Kabul where I met my husband. This is the Kabul that still has a piece of my heart. Tomorrow, this could be gone. I do pray for the safety of my friends. However, my faith wavers. Help me believe that the good ones will survive. Help me believe that all of the hard work we've done and they've done will not have been in vain.
Emily and I are here in Jacks Beach, Florida. Today our guest is teacher, trainer, academic, humanitarian, good friend, Jaala Shaw. She began her teaching career with the Peace Corps in China, which took her to other places as well. But today we really want to focus on her time in Afghanistan from 2010 to 2012 and the friendships she made there that endure to this day. While serving through the U.S. Department of State, she trained teachers at Kabul Education University and worked with teachers and students in the public school system in Kabul. She lived in Kabul in a local apartment outside of the Green Zone, something that seems highly unlikely to be repeated by any Western females anytime in the near future. Jaala, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
So I wish this was not something we were talking about right now.
Yeah, me too.
So the hard question up front is, how are your friends doing? What are we tracking?
Yeah, right now the situation on the ground is changing by the minute. One of my friend's families has gotten out since Monday morning. One friend's family is at the airport waiting. They have a 7-month-old baby and they've been at the airport for 38 hours. 15 minutes ago, I checked in with them. They've had no food or water, no access to those things for the time they're waiting at the airport. My husband, Larry, has multiple friends and colleagues who are trying to get to the airport or are at the airport. It's chaos. Things are going downhill fast, so we're urging our friends, if they do want to leave and they are able, to try to make their way to the airport right now. So that's the reality.
So how is all this communication happening?
It's happening on WhatsApp because it's end-to-end encrypted, and we have no idea if the Taliban is going to be of new or of old. And so we're just assuming that it's Taliban of old, and we're asking our friends not to communicate on Facebook or text message or anything that's less secure. So a lot of the communication's happening on WhatsApp. Some of it's happening on email or just calling each other.
So I think that's a safe assumption, first off, and I think we do know.
Yeah.
I mean, the Taliban is not the Swiss Army now, all of a sudden. One trip to Doha didn't solve anything.
It's true. That's what I believe.
So what's the vibe? I mean, we hear so much stuff about Taliban checkpoints. We hear about Taliban checking phones. Is there English on your phone? If so, go over here. If not, I guess go on your way.
Yeah, it's a little bit chaotic. Taliban isn't just one tribe, and there isn't centralized communication. There isn't one message. There could be some people from one sect in the Taliban who are not getting the Doha message or aren't listening to the centralized communication of their media officer. People in Kabul are getting hit with batons and whipped with whips to go away from the checkpoints. People's phones are getting confiscated. Also, I have Hazara friends who have been kidnapped, interrogated, and dropped back off in their neighborhoods. Then I have other friends who went to the airport and didn't have proper documents and got through. So there's no centralized communication within the Taliban. Some are doing the things that they said they would do. Most are not.
How about we just start here? The Taliban. It's kind of like one word. In America, it's got to get distilled down to one word. And we've talked to some of our guys who have served there, fighting the war against the Taliban, and they're like, look, some of these folks in the city they've been to Doha and they kind of like being in front of the media camera, and maybe they don't want to get assassinated just yet anyway. They're more likely to behave in a certain way. You've got savages out in the countryside. It's not like there's a president that's kind of setting a clear agenda and everybody's on the same page. So from, your time in 2010, 2012, the friendships you've made, I'm sure there were lots of conversations reminiscing about the Taliban, which you've written about, and what you're hearing now. I mean, when we say Taliban, how do you break that down to American ears?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I know. I'm not an expert, but I did live there and I do have that firsthand experience. The word Taliban comes from Arabic. Afghans only understand Arabic because of the Quran. Their language is not Arabic. They speak Dari, which is Farsi, a dialect of Farsi. So, starting with the word Taliban, Talib means student. So, they're students of the Quran in name. I don't believe in practice at all. Taliban is a group of many different tribes, predominantly Pashtun, but then Pashtuns have a lot of different tribes too. Modern borders don't define the Taliban. The Pashtun tribe spreads across Afghanistan and Pakistan and into a lot of other areas as well, but it's made predominantly from Pashtuns, and they're in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and then there's multiple tribes that make up that. The Taliban was a movement created in response to the Mujahideen era and the corruption that stemmed from the war with Russia. They wanted to stamp out that corruption and make it a pure Muslim country. And that was the premise of their ideas. However, Taliban does not live by the Quran as Muslims do. Taliban makes their monies through human trafficking, drug trafficking, smuggling, embezzlement, extortion, kidnapping, and these are not Muslim values. So, who are the Taliban? There are multiple groups and tribes that make up this group that are extremists.
Is there any part of their ideology that could be considered redemptive or good that you know of?
Yeah, there's so many different factions in the Taliban. I'm sure that there are people who do believe that this version of Sharia law is pure and good and right. And I just haven't seen it. I don't know any Taliban personally because up until Saturday, they were the enemy and we tried to avoid them because they want to kidnap and kill us and torture us. Us being either foreign assistance forces or humanitarian aid workers or Afghans, depending on who they were. So, no, I don't believe that the Taliban's version of Islam is pure and good and kind. And maybe it started that way, but they definitely haven't demonstrated it in the last 20 years that I've known the country and the people.
Jaala, you have a unique perspective, different from some of the other conversations that Jason has been having with veterans, I believe.
Mhm.
You were embedded as an educator in connecting with a lot of the women and other men too in that field too. But I from reading the articles you've written and hearing your stories, it seems like you've got this unique perspective of hearing the women, how the women have viewed the Taliban over the years. And I think it's really interesting to talk about like what Afghanistan was, the miniskirt era,
Yeah.
and then, how it changed. And then how, when you were there, what it was like, a little bit of reopening, not exactly going back to wearing miniskirts by any stretch of the imagination, but it was changing. And now we're looking at sort of another dark period. So can you tell us a little bit more about how those stories were conveyed to you? I mean, I'm sure you've got some interesting anecdotes.
Yeah, I'll just go back and explain how I was there in what capacity, and then we can go into kind of the evolution of fashion, which is endemic of how the population is treated and the freedom that they have. I was there as an English language fellow and specialist with the US Department of State. It's basically an education program where they send professors into countries and they train teachers and work in the local schools. But then, when you're in a country as an educator, ancillary projects kind of pop up and you take on whatever the people want. So it's basically like Peace Corps. We assist the locals in the things that they want us to do, educate, but also learn. So I'm there to represent American culture and teach people about that in English. And then I'm there to learn about Afghan culture and then come home and teach people about Afghan culture as well. It's public diplomacy. So it's a branch of public diplomacy in the State Department. That's how I was there. There were only a handful of fellows that ever went into Afghanistan. My partner, Tara, and I were the first fellows to be there. They tried one before us, but he didn't have freedom of movement. He was part of the embassy motor pool, and they realized that didn't happen. He couldn't get to school. He wasn't important. So Tara and I, our project was that mission I told you, but somehow our regional English language officer got us housing outside of the Green Line, and the Asia Foundation, which is a humanitarian organization there, sponsored us and gave us drivers. So we were kind of just free in the city to do as we pleased.
That's amazing, by the way. That is a real boon. I want you to talk more about like your freedom of movement and what that meant.
Yeah.
Not being restricted to like the embassy walls.
Yeah. Nobody could believe it. I think Tara and I were the only American women in Kabul at the time that had freedom of movement. And we were just as surprised as everyone else. So to say that we had freedom of movement doesn't mean that we could just walk around the city whenever we felt like it. We couldn't leave our homes without Afghan men or a group of females walking with us. And this is just because of the structure of society in Afghanistan. Women just don't walk alone. It's not seen as kind of kosher. But yeah, we had a driver from the Asia Foundation and he took us to school every day. To put it into context, we drove to school a different way every day because there was always the threat of Taliban kidnap and extortion. And our government doesn't negotiate with terrorists is the official line. So Tara and I had to avoid getting captured by terrorists. Took a different way to school every day, worked at multiple schools, but our base was I worked at Kabul Education University and Tara worked at Kabul University, which is kind of the Harvard of Afghanistan. So we had the freedom of movement. We went to the market with our friends, shopped in the market, which Americans would call the farmer's market, but you can imagine that it was a little different than the farmer's market. There's a butcher section. They're cutting sheep's heads off on a wooden stump. And then the other sheep are waiting to be slaughtered looking at that sheep. It was awesome.
Yeah, I bet. We mentioned the policy about not, negotiating with terrorists. And as a general rule, if you're going to be operating or working in a place like this, you have to have this sort of, responsibility for yourself. Yeah. The cavalry isn't always going to come. And if they do, it might be too late. So this is the kind of work that I was drawn to as well, as you know, and, the fact that you were able to even get out and go to these places like the market, even if it was the group of females, it's really something that you were beyond the Green Line, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, Fridays are the day of rest there. So I do one of two things. If I really needed rest, I'd go to Camp Eggers and I'd do CrossFit. And I'd hang out in our American zone and wear my booty shorts and sports bra. The chagrin of all of the
freedom
and whoever else, they're like, this is not in the uniform code. I'm like, don't worry, I'm a civilian. But the other thing that I would do would go to Babar Gardens, which is like the Central Park, or Kabul Zoo, or walk around the market with my Afghan friends. And those are the things that you did on Fridays. So I had multiple families adopt me so that I could do those things. But 2010 to 2012 was kind of this time, it wasn't safe. There's suicide bombings in the markets quite frequently and in the streets, but it was generally safe for you to do regular things that Afghans do. You avoided the markets on Fridays because things kind of happen in a certain sphere. And if you're aware of that, then you just don't go there. We wouldn't go inside of the Green Line. If I were going to Camp Eggers, that was usually my most nervous moment because I had a driver from the Asia Foundation who couldn't enter the green zone. So I would get dropped off at a bank outside of the green zone and walk in by myself. But since I live outside of it, I look like an Afghan. So it'd be a little bit dangerous for me walking through there. And sometimes I didn't know if I should speak Dari, Farsi, the language of Afghans, or English when I was walking through, because if I spoke Dari in the green zone, then someone might think I'm an Afghan with nefarious intentions. If I spoke English in the green zone, then maybe someone else would hear me. And when I walked out, I would be targeted. So you always have to make a lot of decisions when you're in Kabul in the moment to try to protect yourself and those around you. Yeah, that's kind of what it's like looking like me too. So outside of the green zone, I wore chadar, which is head cover, and covered my entire body. I can tell you how I met Larry because that brings up how I met my husband.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to tell that story.
So speaking of looking like an Afghan, you always, when you're a civilian, you need an escort to get onto the bases. And I wanted to do CrossFit on the base because I didn't have an Olympic lifting area or free weights. And at the time, as an aside, I was trying to make the CrossFit Games from Asia. And so I needed to train with weights which weren't in my basement. So I started to work out on Fridays at Camp Eggers. My escort at the time was gone. She was on a different deployment. And so my husband, Larry, had been a Department of Defense contractor. He's former Special Forces 10th Group.
10th Group.
Yeah, the originals.
Yes.
So she asked Larry to escort me on the base. Well, he's waiting at the gate, and I come strolling up in my chadar with my face and my body covered, and I'm looking around, and I was like, Larry? And he looks at me like, you guys know Larry, but I'll paint a picture for our audience. He's like a very aware, kind of quiet former SF guy. So he's like, why is this Afghan lady looking at me? And how does she know my name? So he kind of looked like he wanted to maybe not kill me, but I was a threat. And I took my scarf off and I was like, oh, I'm Jaala. I'm the person who's coming to lift weights with you. And he's still like looking a little suspicious. He's like, okay. I'm like, I'll show you my passport. So I was like, here's my passport. He's like, okay, follow me.
That's awesome.
So Larry escorted me onto the base. We lifted weights and nothing much happened. You know, we're at Camp Eggers lifting weights together. But I ended up talking to Larry online for about 4 years after that because I started to get into endurance events and I thought he had the intel and could help me. We did end up getting together 4 years later, and it was just our 4th wedding anniversary, but we've been together for 6 years since. So we met in Kabul, and he thought I was an Afghan lady.
That's hilarious. How many people can say that?
Yeah.
So what kind of friendships have you maintained through you and Larry? And I mean, what kind of conversations would you have with them? How is that endured? You know, I mean, because there's always, it's hard to speak to foreigners, even when you're there, even when it's harder than it is. You don't have this commonality so much. Mm-hmm. So you have to build those bridges. And I know Larry's been back and forth to there a lot since. I mean, it's one thing to say, you know, Kabul means a lot to me, but how?
Yeah, I mean, going in there as an educator, the friends that I made there are educators now, most of them. So 3 of the men who I taught at Kabul Education University got Fulbright scholarships to the United States. 1 studied for his master's degrees in India. 2 of my closest female friends, the one whose voice message that you read, got their master's degree in either India or another country. Someone got their master's degree in England. So in general, education means a lot to Afghans, and they really value education both for men and women. In the post-Taliban era, in 2001, the literacy rate in Afghanistan was 17%. Today, it's much higher than 70%. I heard an acquaintance, Ambassador Ryan Crocker, he was the ambassador to Afghanistan from the United States when I was there. He was getting interviewed a little while ago, and I wrote extensively about this, but he said something that resonated with me. He's like, 70% or more of the population is educated now, and a large majority of them are women. He's like, Taliban can't do the same things that they did before. They can't kill the whole country. Everyone's educated now. And that is a weapon that we gave and the Afghans gave to themselves that no one can take away. This idea that an educated populace can't be manipulated is strong. Education is something that they have no matter where they go. So the commonality with my friends and I is that value of education and to teach others how to make decisions on their own, and that there are so many possibilities within their own society and outside. All of my Afghan friends wanted to stay in Afghanistan or return to Afghanistan so that they could be part of the nation building effort that's happened over the last 2 decades. They're committed to making Afghanistan stronger. Right now, there's an imminent threat to the things that they've done and their ideology. They don't want to leave. Most Afghans who have been there and are educated want to remain in their country, but they also don't want to be persecuted by Taliban because we don't know what's going to happen.
That speaks really highly of the type of people they are. There's always the risk you run of a brain drain when people get educated and find that, there's not opportunities here. We need to go elsewhere. And you can't on one hand blame people for wanting to improve the lives of their families and themselves by leaving. But it's really speaks volumes that these friends of yours all either stayed or returned after getting their master's degrees and other degrees and wanted to go back and make their country better. And that was important to them. And what's been going on lately feels nothing but like a setback in many ways. But I think it's a glimmer of hope to mention what the ambassador said and to talk about education as something that can't be taken away. It can be threatened, like you said, and it can be made very difficult, but the seeds of these ideas have been planted already for, the last 2 decades or so.
Yeah. And I want to keep on talking about the commonalities because Jason's right. When foreigners meet each other, there's this struggle for common ground sometimes. But going into it, Tara, my partner and I, partner teacher with the fellows program, we both were speaking Dari, taking Dari lessons, listening to singers who were Afghan. There's a couple of Afghan singers who have lasted through all generations, and even today, Ahmed Zaire and Farhed Darya, they're kind of like the crooners of Afghanistan. And we started connecting through culture and music. And you would think oh, Afghans aren't really interested in American culture. Maybe there's some other things that they're listening to. But no, I had to do lessons on Madonna and John Denver and Jennifer Lopez. And I'm really?
So great.
I didn't even know who John Denver is. Well, I didn't, but I do now, obviously.
Music has this amazing way of connecting cultures across the world.
Exactly. All of my university students spoke English, but I'd go into the villages to work with the women, as you had mentioned, or I'd go into the elementary schools, and the women knew the song lyrics to songs that were popular at the time in English, but couldn't speak English, So music connected us too, and poetry and literature, depending on who you're talking to.
So I've got something, and I don't really know exactly how to ask it. It's kind of like there's been so much oppression. I mean, let's go back to where we are right this second. I mean, it's nice that people don't want to leave in essence, but the airport is not exactly, it's not like, hey, you can leave if you want to, right? So time will tell. I mean, Taliban has US made weapons with US made optics, with US made Humvees and US made ballistics and bombs and you name it, right? And comms equipment, right? I mean, they are well positioned to lie in wait and we'll see what happens once the last plane leaves. My question is, you spent a lot of time with the women in Afghanistan, specifically the women in Kabul. There's been so much oppression. What's going to be the ability to rise up mentally, physically, across the board? What's your hope, expectation, dream for how this plays out?
Yeah, the history is written on the wall. Women right now are hiding in their basements. They're hiding. And even the friend that you read the voice message from, she's covering herself completely in her backyard today when coalition forces are still helping with evacuation. So before it's even gotten bad, women are hiding and covering Nobody is going to work. The Taliban said, okay, next Saturday you can go back to work because Friday is the day of rest in Muslim countries. Saturday is Monday. Next Saturday, go to work. Tomorrow, no one's going to work. The women are afraid to be beaten, persecuted, kidnapped, raped. Yes, the Taliban rapes people and beats them. That is not a value of Islam. But women are terrified. They aren't going out. They don't expect it to get better. And you asked about the ability to rise up and defend. They don't have the ability, as you stated before. They've inherited all of the things that we've left behind, these hard assets. It's not looking great. I listened to an interview from a female member of parliament who her entire family is in Iran now, and they're saying, come and join us. But she says, no, I want to stay and represent women in the Afghan government. Taliban saying that women can be in the government. In fact, we have more, like I'm an Afghan. Afghanistan has more women in parliament than percentage wise than Americans do women in the House of Representatives. So
that's about to change.
Yeah, exactly. I fear that representation is going to go away. There's some female members of parliament who are staying there and saying that they'll represent women. There's a possibility that might happen, but I feel like the possibility is less than 0.001%. So no, they're not going to have the capability to defend themselves, to protest. People have been killed at protests in Jalalabad, in Herat, in these cities that are, Herat is quite a progressive city, and female professors and students were turned around at the gates of the university yesterday morning, Monday morning. Taliban tells them to go home and cover up. They said that women could go to school. None of the girls are going to school right now. The schools are shut down. Everyone's afraid of violence and retribution. So It's pretty stark. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if there's lip service done to, oh yeah, you can still do these things, the trust is not there, and that's the reality on the ground. And then it's just going to be, that's going to become the new norm, to be like, well, I guess they don't want to come. We told them they could, but but there's an intimidation factor that's underlying all this.
Yeah.
Okay, let me reframe this just a little bit then. So let's say, God, this is like a nightmare. Let's say that there was a foreign entity in America that was setting up checkpoints, and they were anti-American. And try that around here, the people will rise up. Like, we have guns, we have weaponry in our homes, and this is not some call to action. Like, this is a total hypothetical, right? Mm-hmm. Like, those checkpoints would be under assault from private citizens who would go after that. When they start setting up sex trafficking and harems and, rape depots, you have, like, the only language that's going to work is violence.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my belief. I don't think that there's a way that you're going to reason with the Taliban. Doha did not get them to change their stripes. These are people that are, by all accounts of everyone I've ever talked to who served against them, violence is about it. I mean, that's my belief. I don't know if that's your belief, but does the population have the stomach or the will to take this on?
There are protests happening. I mean, I don't know how long they'll be able to last, but
Jason made a good point. Violence is the way in many situations, but I want to look at the past 2 decades too, and kind of the systems that have been built through education and work of NGOs and humanitarian efforts to kind of build within these systems of support that aren't the military or the violent route, which works, as we know. But like Ambassador Crocker said, we gave and they received and gave it themselves the gift of this education and knowledge that there is another way. And it's hard to fight with your brain, but people do, and they know, and they have these systems. And I'm not saying like it's the Underground Railroad, but it's very similar to our Underground Railroad during slave times. Afghans have connections outside of the country and in the country to help each other and to maybe rise up in a more secretive fashion against Taliban than they have before. And there are also Afghan organizations within the country that are helping women do these things and avoid these things. I think that there is a stronger civil society, a system of civil society these days than there was in 1994. And the world's different technology wise. We can hear and see all of the things that are happening a lot easier than we could 20 years ago, 25 years ago when Taliban first took the country. So, yes, violence is an option, but then there's this civil society factor. An educated populace can't be manipulated as easy as an uneducated populace. There's so many more people that know reality and know how to connect with others and get out of it. Most of them do live in the big cities, Kabul, Herat, Mazar-e Sharif, and then the villagers might not have these civil systems that they can access. And government, though the government looks like it's dissolved, there's many members of parliament, including Hamid Karzai and other actors who have been there for a very long time, that are staying to try to help in these other ways. And the female component, there's a majority of female members of parliament that weren't there before that are staying. So yes, violence is very effective and it could be the only way eventually, but civil society has been built up so much over the last 2 decades that it's harder to manipulate and control this educated populace. And I'm pretty idealistic. I think Emily and I are very similar in that regard. So it is a wait and see, but I think that there are so many more avenues for Afghans to defend themselves and to resist. You wouldn't have seen protests in Jalalabad. Let's talk about Jalalabad. It borders on Pakistan, and this is where a lot of Taliban have crossed into Afghanistan in the last 20 years. Jalalabad, when my Afghan friends from Kabul visited Jalalabad, they'd grow their beard and wear peyran tambon, the traditional Afghan clothes, to fit in so they looked more like Taliban. So if people are protesting in Jalalabad and trying to put up the Afghan flag, we have a little hope. There's protests even in Kandahar and Herat. So
there's protests right now.
There was a protest here in Jacksonville Beach.
I know.
I was shocked.
So great. But, it's just a civil
I wish
society.
those protests could send bullets through the hearts of every Taliban on these checkpoints right now.
Yeah. And who knows? But civil society is different than it was 27 years ago when they took the country. It's different. And it's my hope that it goes a different way.
Like, does everybody have an AK in their home?
No, they don't, but a lot of people do have access to AKs.
All right, this isn't Iraq or Texas. Got it.
Yeah. I'm laughing because there is like control of weapons there, and people are like, how do all Americans have guns? I'm like, that's another conversation. But yeah, Afghans don't. And it's scary for them right now.
But Jaala, what do you know from your contacts about, there's been some speculation that this was all sort of planned. Ghani knew this months in advance. This was just basically a deal, brokered on the top levels to just make it easy or something like that. I don't know if that's what sort of stories you're hearing about that, or if they are even able to share that. But, it just happens without a shot fired, so to speak. It's like everyone's wondering why all these forces that were, so well trained and so much money put into and so much effort, that they just collapsed.
I'm thinking anyone who knows a little bit about Afghanistan can see that there was something else. And it's going to be really interesting to read the history books about this past week and month, because people on the ground know that the Afghan National Police and the Afghan National Army and others who work for the government or military receive salaries intermittently. And that's been happening for, when I was there, my professor friends, they get government salaries, weren't getting paid every month. The corruption is wide and deep in the Afghan government. And the best thing I could say is that it sucks. And it's been happening for 2 decades. And the reason why Taliban was trusted when they took over the country the first time was because that was one of their taglines. Forget about the drug trafficking and everything else that was happening. They said, oh, we're going to stamp out corruption. And the Afghans were like, yes, do that. So the government has been corrupt for a long time. And we know that corruption probably has something to do with it these days too.
Yeah.
So that's my answer to you. Yes, I believe that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes, because Afghans are fierce fighters. They've never lost a war on their own soil, is what every Afghan soldier would tell you. And to see the forces dissolve to a degree was very hard to hear and hard to see. So
There's a lot of sort of talk about, did we go into Afghanistan really knowing the enemy, knowing the culture, knowing the people? I believe that you actually did. You're someone who was predisposed and also dedicated to, learning and being open-minded about these sort of things. Do you have any thoughts on if as a whole, and I'm not talking about your soldiers, who are just doing their duty and serving at the needs of our country and as they're directed. But I'm talking about the policymakers, the educated, the people that have all access to all types of intel, every resource at their fingertips, and the decisions that they made. Do you think they cared enough, or did they really want to know what was going on in Afghanistan?
yeah, I can talk from personal experience and from my position as an educator, and it's a very easy lift for me, not for others who are following orders. I think it's existentially a different argument that goes on in the mind, but it's an easy lift for me because my mission through public diplomacy and through the State Department was to build relationships and to educate and assist. And that's an easy thing to do when you're committed long term to it. So 2 years in a place, I wasn't even teaching at first. My department head at my university wanted me to observe and learn Farsi and make friends and learn Hazaragi. We have a huge minority population of Hazaras at our university. Go into the neighborhoods, eat the food, go to weddings. It takes a long time to build relationships. And the mission of public diplomacy in Afghanistan at the time when I went there, a decade after coalition forces came into Afghanistan, was easy for me and for the other professors and teachers that I was with. And it was clear to me.
Wasn't the quote that you heard, patience is bitter, but it has a sweet fruit?
Yeah. Sabr talkas lakimbare shavindara. That's it in Dari. And yeah, patience is bitter, but it has a sweet fruit. That's another thing that's really cool about Afghans. They always speak in these proverbs.
Yeah. That's funny, Jala. Like we think of 2 years in a place like that as that's an investment of your time. Like that's a long time, but that's not
It's
a
not
long time for different cultures.
for 10 years.
They think that's a blip. And it's true. It's like, the quote that Ben Bunn put in his night. It's like an Afghan told him, you have the watches, but we have the time.
Yeah.
And, for a culture that's, been around for a very long time and is okay with things moving slowly.
Yeah.
And has a high threshold for suffering. That's the kind of level of understanding of culture that I think I wish sometimes our military leaders at least acted upon more often.
Yeah, it's hindsight's 2020, right? But
we've seen this repeat over history, though.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
This
but
isn't the first time.
what was the intent, though, right? I mean, it hasn't been clear for a really long time. I mean, we suck at nation building. The military was built to defeat Hitler, and then it kind of adapted to Vietnam. But we lost the things that worked in Vietnam was special forces and MACV-SOG working with the Montagnards. The things that worked in Afghanistan were special forces working with the Northern Alliance,
and people like Jala. The public diplomacy programs, they work.
Absolutely. Without the defense, though, without the ability to let people move around and be safe. I mean, you've got Taliban at checkpoints.
You have
right
to
now.
have the hard and soft power work together.
Yeah,
it's not one without the other.
And this is what I tell people about special forces. I say that y'all are the Peace Corps of the special operations community. You learn the languages and know the people and go in and integrate. And this is with force. So you're coupling the two things that I believe you need to help the society move forward. You probably need force, but you also need that education piece and that awareness piece of who the people are and what they're going through. And special forces does that. But yeah, the public diplomacy piece, that soft power, Ambassador Crocker mentioned that as well. He said, when we do nation building, we need both soft and hard power. we hope that we don't need hard power in conflict resolution and negotiation. Everything ends at the negotiation table. So
Look, the Taliban are like the Kraken, right? Like you
yeah,
can hope and you can wish and you can say, oh man, I hope the Kraken's a beautiful butterfly, right? And I hope that version of the Kraken shows up today. And it's
uh-huh.
just it's fallacy and it's never ever going to change. It's like who's the dude that shook hands with Hitler and sort of said, oh, everything's going to be all right. The Munich Pact of 1938
Yeah.
or whatever,
Mhm.
right? I mean, it's insanity. I mean, it's like, imagine if Hitler were still alive and someone wanted to go broker a deal with Hitler. It's ludicrous.
And I mean, back then we did have diplomats still trying to broker deals with Hitler. I
Yeah,
mean,
we did.
No, they did in Munich. And it was,
And it went,
that's exactly
you
what
know
you're
what it did? It bought Hitler time to build
Yes.
fucking concentration camps.
Yeah.
And to do his absolute worst. And that's exactly what's happening right now. The Taliban, if they're smart, because I got to put the enemy's hat on for a second. If they're smart, what they're going to do is they're going to allow this kind of peaceful transfer. They're going to say, hey, we deal in millennia, not in months. And they're going to get all the people out. And then they're going to slowly start assassinating anybody with 2 brain cells that's done anything in the education field. Or, this is always what happens. Hitler's burning the books. He's taking the artists and the critics.
It happened in Iraq, mass graves, when you come back.
Yeah, it's happening now, you guys. I mean, the assassinations, the targeted assassinations, there aren't official reports, but like I was mentioning, my Hazara ethnic minority friends in Dashti Barchi is the Hazara neighborhood in Kabul. There's already kidnappings, interrogations, and their bodies, not dead, some are just beaten to almost dead, getting dropped off in Dashti Barchi. That's this week.
Yeah.
So it's already happening to Hazaras. Hazaras are the Shia minority and Pashto are Sunni. It's already happening. The women are already getting turned away at the universities. Our friends are dodging bullets at the airport. Like they say, they're not shooting.
Like really top level for those out listening is, the Sunnis and the Shia are just sworn enemies. Like Iran-Iraq war was all based on this. We shifted up that power in that part of the world. And now the Shia are in power in Iraq because they're the majority. And now they're more closely aligned with Iran. And it's just a mess, right?
And Jaala, the Hazara have always been persecuted over the years in Afghanistan.
Thousands of years. And just to distill it down for people who don't know the difference between Shia and Sunni, it's basically just religious authority and who leads the faction of Islam. So the Shia are those who basically followed the Prophet's cousin and son-in-law Ali, and the Sunni decided after the Prophet Muhammad died that they'd follow his closest companion, Abu Bakr. So for Westerners or non-Muslims, that's a Sunni and Shia. It's just a question of succession. And then over time, these things have become crazier. But yeah.
I do want to hear about sort of the changes and, before Taliban and stuff like that, because I think the history is fascinating. It's like if you look back at Afghanistan in the 70s and the 80s, it's very cosmopolitan. It almost feels European, and it's like amazing to think how it went back into the dark ages, when the Taliban took over.
Yep.
And then I think you were actually there in a really special time, Jaala. Like, I'm no expert on Afghanistan, but I know enough of the timeline to know that there was this window. You were able as a Western woman to have freedom of movement. There were restrictions, but I mean, let's be honest. I think you would have more or less needed to have those in a lot of places in that area of the world. But I mean, it's pretty amazing to me that this is recent history, folks. Like this is like our lifetime. This is not like we're talking about the 1700s. Like this is 1980. And then it's like the curtain, it just falls. And then here we are again in the same position of about to see something like this happen again. And just, we're hoping, like you said, that these underground networks and these like connections that have been made and that these smart, resilient people who love their country have created, I like to think that they haven't been like, just living large, that they've actually been, that they have actually been preparing for this time.
Yeah.
Tell me that that's true.
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak to if it's true or not, but I can tell you about what you said. Kind of the women's fashion over the last 40 years indicates the era that they were in, right? Some of my friends' mothers have pictures of themselves in mini skirts and crop tops in the 70s in Kabul until Ayatollah Khomeini came in the late 70s, 79, 80 happened, and Islamic law was blanketed kind of from Iran across Afghanistan. The covering came into play through Taliban when women were just completely sequestered. And then for the last 20 years, the growing liberalness of fashion. I would wear a mini skirt to teach, but I'm wearing black pants and a long black shirt under my mini skirt. So the fashion kind of came back to this Islamic country. And I wrote about it in one of my articles I shared with you guys, and maybe we can link it. So in Pashto, Bohan Tun is university, but they would call it the fashion tune. They would call it like the place of fashion for the university students. They wear a uniform all through 12th grade. And then at the university, which is where most of the love marriages happen, they're wearing all the fashion that they want to wear in a conservative manner. Women are still wearing chadars and long black sleeves and black pants, but under these mini skirts and crop tops. And it's just, it was a really beautiful time, and I really enjoyed it. And my Afghan students look at it and they say, oh, those are the golden years. Like, we're old, elderly people now. But yeah, you're right. I was there in a time of growth and openness in the society.
Okay, so let's talk about the seasonality of Afghanistan. So there's fighting season, and then there's really harsh winters. And to go back to enemy mindset, maybe you play nice until you have a winter, which is inherently a little bit less activity. Stop me when I'm wrong. And then, it's going to open up for more fighting and more oppression and more killing and more raping and more all of these things that, are going to fade from the American consciousness, because it's just going to be just like it happened in Somalia. You just expect it. That's the fear, right? And so what do you expect in terms of what's a winter like from your perspective when you were living there in Kabul?
Yeah, this is true. Even in the last 20 years, there's definitely a fighting season and a resting season, like a forced kind of time when people don't fight. And Afghans were ready for it every May. And then they were ready for the rest time in the winters. And the reason is because we have some of the most harsh mountains in the world in Afghanistan, the Hindu Kush, and you simply just can't drive anything past your village on a road. The roads don't exist. The mountains are crazy. It's cold. There just isn't like an infrastructure. Like, you need an infrastructure to fight, but there is no infrastructure to fight in the winter in Afghanistan. And so I feel like you're right. This is happening at this time because this is a good time for fighting. And it's probably going to get a lot worse before there's a break in the fighting. And there might not be, because there is an infrastructure for fighting in the cities. And now the Taliban are in the cities. And so maybe it won't stop in the winter this time. But yes, there's a rhythm to the fighting season in Afghanistan. And I thought it was absurd and ludicrous that the weather kind of dictates when people fight. But when you do live in the harsh mountain areas, you can't move when the winter comes. And so this is an opportunity for Taliban right now to further their mission. And it's a scary time because it's also fighting season.
Jaala, I have something to confess that's, on my preparing for talking with you and seeing the news and reading about everything, it's kind of takes you back, so sometimes, war-torn places. And on my way over here, I saw this truck pull out in front of me, like a little ways ahead. And my first thought was like, oh my gosh, there's two guys in the back with a gun, and it was like two golf bags.
Yeah.
And I was like, dear Lord, like, we are so lucky. We are so lucky to live in a place that we have our problems, but our problems are not that it just doesn't backslide into there's guys with gun trucks now setting up checkpoints and telling you when and where to go. I've lived in a lot of countries that have that, and I fortunately have never seen that in ours. And it's upsetting to think about what actually it means to have freedoms taken away. you know?
Yeah, I don't like to get into equivalency because everyone's problems are their own and they're important
Right.
to them, but it's true. When my partner, teacher Tara, and I went to Afghanistan, I already had all this history in Palestine and Israel and China and Micronesia where there's not checkpoints. But yes, in China and Palestine and Israel, in police states or places that had a more tumultuous recent history. And I was used to people walking around with weapons and checking you and being invasive and intrusive and being in police states. And so when I got to Afghanistan, and there were checkpoints everywhere, not Taliban ones when I was there, obviously, but police checkpoints all over the city, metal detectors going into your university. It's a police state. Tara was like, this is crazy. Aren't you afraid?
Hmm.
No, not really. I mean, this is kind of par for much of the developing world that there are.
Hmm.
This is called progress, Tara.
Yeah, exactly. I was
We
like,
like these checkpoints.
checkpoint. So yes, like there are so many places in the world. To Jason's point, like this could not happen in America because we are the people we are. I had another post after the one that you read where that person's house got taken over by Taliban. Can you imagine your house in Jacksonville Beach and you come home and there's like someone else in your house? It wouldn't happen. Like this is Nazi Germany in
Right. Well,
Afghanistan right now.
happened in
Taliban,
the Civil War here, but that was a long time ago. Yeah.
so they took her house and her neighbor's house and all their artillery is in the backyard. I'm like, that would not, like, Americans, can you imagine like someone coming? This is my master bedroom, like someone coming into my house and taking it? No, that would not happen here. So I want people to think about what's happening. It's 2021 and people's houses are getting taken, not by force yet, because this is the nice Taliban this week. It's going to be by force soon. Nobody was in the house that they took.
Let's be honest. They're being forced to. It's just not called that.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, what can you say? Hey, I've got my artillery here. Would you mind?
Yeah.
Possibly. Could I possibly, ring a ding ding, maybe set it up in your backyard? Hey, you know what would be nice? Maybe some tea, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
You've got some food. Excellent. It's mine now.
Another point that I wanted to make about that is that at first I said Taliban is made up of Pashtuns. Well, a majority of Afghans are Pashtun. They don't care if you're in the same tribe as them, if you're not Taliban. So let's just talk about that. The friend's house who got taken is Pashtu. So no, not all Pashtuns are Taliban. And they don't give a crap if you are from the same tribe. If you're not Taliban, then you're not.
This might be a dumb question, but what sort of identifies someone as Taliban? Like, how do you know?
Look at what they're wearing. I mean, I'm kind of smirking or scoffing. Like they're wearing peyran tambon, which is the long shirt over baggy pants.
Black.
And they could be wearing black. Most of the time, it used to be black turbans. They've changed their fashion a little bit. They might be wearing a jacket over their peyran tambon. They're wearing scuffy tennis shoes. Basically, it's not a uniform and it's not modern fashion. And the men have a very long beard. You will never see women. Women are not part of Taliban. They don't fight with them. They don't move with them. They have wives or multiple wives. Women who are owned or married into Taliban will only be wearing burqa, which is the blue sheet covering that you see some women in Afghanistan wearing, which before last week was probably only about 10% of the population in the villages. Yes, so Taliban, you can instantly identify them by what they're wearing.
Mm-hmm.
My friend whose message that you read likes to say, like, they just don't look like the rest of us Afghans. They just don't. So
It seems, I mean, they seem foreign, it seems like a foreign entity that took over, it doesn't seem to have much tied to their history from what I understand.
they do and they don't. So it's Afghans in the city wear peyran tambon on Friday. It's their like leisurely clothes. So, but if you are there and you do understand the culture, they definitely look different than everyday Afghans. But Afghans know when they see them too. It's just how it is. There's different hats in Afghanistan, and they wear a turban, whereas other Afghans don't. There's a circular hat, and right now I'm losing my Farsi. But if they're wearing a circular hat, usually they're Pashtun. not Taliban. So I can go on about hats
What
that men.
about the one that Karzai used to always wear?
Yeah, and Hamid Karzai wears that. That's a Mazar-e Sharif kind of fashion.
Hmm.
Also not Taliban. So Taliban generally wear turbans. And if somebody is listening and I get this wrong, then I apologize. But there's a lot of different hats, and a black turban is decidedly Taliban. Not a black turban, could be anyone. It's just another hat.
All right, so kind of coming full circle, we started out and we read your friend's quote about there is no hope. It's I'm certain very easy to feel that way. What are you hopeful for? What kind of message of hope would you want to pass on, and how do we process this?
Yeah, I mean, when the Taliban enters your city and you see them walking in the streets and you have been working for most of your life, that friend who you read the message from is in her 30s. So most of her life, she has been working to rebuild her society that she couldn't go to elementary school because she was in elementary school during Taliban. When you see that those people enter your city with guns and no one's defending you, at that moment there was no hope for her, and that's how she felt. My message to my Afghan friends, her included, is that Afghans who are in other countries and foreigners are not forgetting about you. There are numerous organizations, governments all over the world who are trying to expedite evacuation and are not going to forget about those who are left behind or those who choose to stay. There's so many programs that obviously they're not getting you out of there quickly, but that are constructed to help you. So I want my Afghan friends to know you're not forgotten, and you never were by me personally and society at large. The American people care about your fate, and a lot of people are working to help get you out or to help you if you're still there. I also want to give my American friends all the resources they can about how to help Afghans, and maybe we can link some of the things that I mentioned in the episode. But there's two websites that are actually like legit vetted information that you can use, whether you're Afghan, Afghan American, or Americans or foreigners can look at this too. But like England and France and Italy and Spain and all these other countries, Germany have their other organizations. So I linked it in my bio on my Instagram. But Modesto Junior College is where my partner teacher Tara works now, and she's a huge advocate for Afghans in America and in Afghanistan. They have a host of resources, some about special immigrant visas, SIV visas, some about P2 visas, which are a new kind of expedited visa for Afghans trying to leave. The other website that has a host of resources, and they have German, British, French resources too, is womenforafghanwomen.org. So womenforafghanwomen.org has been working in Afghanistan for the last 2 decades, and they have lists of resources. They also have lists of countries who are accepting Afghans that you don't need a visa to be there. And there's a lot of African countries. Benin is accepting. How are they going to get there? I don't know. But there's
They'll
countries.
find a way.
Yeah. Afghans find a way.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of countries accepting Afghans where you don't need a visa. There's electronic visas to some bordering countries, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan. So I think there's e-visas to those countries. The border that's closest to Herat in Western Afghanistan, the Iranian border, Iranian government has said that they're accepting refugees through that border. Anyway, so we'll list a lot of resources if we can, you guys, but I want my Afghan friends to know we're not forgetting about you. You're on our minds, and we're going to hope for you, and we're going to take action to back that up.
Thank you for that. That's
Mhm.
a lot of actionable information. There's one other footnote. There's been talk about money and donation money. What are you hearing is best now?
Yeah, I would say don't donate money just yet unless it's like a foreign run organization. I would not give money to organizations in Afghanistan right now. The Taliban just gained access to a government central bank. They are legitimate government. Well, maybe not legitimate in our eyes, but they have the ability to squander and steal money in a systematic way now. I would look through that Women for Afghan Women website, and they're an organization in Afghanistan, but run outside, and their money is housed outside of Afghanistan. They have a lot of information on there about how you can donate. So don't give money to just anybody, but money is basically the best thing to give at this time so that those organizations can support refugees in other countries resettle. So money is important, but be really discerning about who you give it to. So be careful about that.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
You got anything in closing, Em?
No, I just want to thank you, Jaala, for coming on and talking about this very relevant and important topic. It's on a lot of people's minds. And I'm really glad that, someone like you and Tara are still connected with people. I mean, that's our way of kind of by proxy being connected. And it's important to keep these conversations going because it's really easy to just be like, it's not right in front of me. And it's like you have to keep these real people and their lives present in your mind.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. My Afghan friends appreciate it too. And they agree. If we don't talk about it, people don't know. So let's keep on talking about it and trying to advocate for those that can't advocate for themselves at this point. So thanks, guys.
Jaala, thanks for coming on. Everyone else out there, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.